I will hand over to Morgan. Morgan is the general coordinator of Vía Campesina, which is the global peasants movement. She is also a vegetable farmer in France and a member of Confédération Paysanne. And Morgan, if you would like to take it away.
Hello, good morning to all. Good afternoon and good evening for some of you. So indeed, I will present to you the Vía Campesina proposal for a new trade framework based on food sovereignty. So I will share my screen. So as it was already mentioned, basically since Vía Campesina was born in 92-93, peasants' organizations have been struggling against the WTO and the neoliberal trade order because it was very clear from the peasants' organizations all over the world that globalizing trade, bringing more competition between countries would be detrimental to peasants, small-scale farmers, agricultural workers, whether in Africa or in Europe, whether in Latin America or in North America, whether in Asia, everywhere, whether northern countries or southern countries, no matter, that it would be bad for us. So it was a really strong incentive for peasants, small-scale farmers, and agricultural workers organization to unite in the late 80s and early 90s, in the time when the Uruguay round was around, that would lead then in 95 to the creation of the WTO. So actually the concerns that we had were right, because, well, after 30 years of WTO, where as it led us to corporate concentration on the food chain, creation of quasi-monopolies in the food industry, as we can see with the ABCD companies in the grain trading sector, climate crisis linked to monoculture, industrial lifts, the fact that the food is traveling all around with massive greenhouse gas emission, the loss of biodiversity everywhere linked to monoculture, for farmers, the rising of the cost of production and fall price to which we are getting paid for our production, which is leading to massive rural debt and huge distress for many peasants communities all over the world. The dismantling of market regulation and price support in so many countries, but in particular in Europe, I think it has to be said that in Europe it's still very strong, while other countries, other regions in the world have either maintained market regulation or have created back market regulation mechanism. The speculation of trade on food prices that we have seen everywhere in the world on the last years, it's been very clear that there is a speculation on food that has led to a massive increase of price paid by the consumers and a lot of difficulties for consumers to afford healthy food. The vulnerability to disruption and shocks, well, if you depend entirely for your food of imports, and that there is huge speculation on international food in international market, then it's to huge disruption in some countries, as we have seen in 2007, 2008, but also in the last years. The increased exploitation of the workers in the food chain and agricultural industry, these workers being very vulnerable, most of the time migrant workers, and the salaries, the wages have been kept very low, and the conditions of work maintained as terrible working conditions. And also the fact that food is being used as a weapon, as we see right now in the genocide in Gaza, but also in many other wars and conflict. And this is leading to a growing situation of hunger all over the world, most of the time linked with with wars, colonization, occupation, and militarization. The new thing with the creation of the WTO in '95 is that it was that before in the GATT, agriculture was not included. So with WTO, agriculture was included in the will to liberalize and globalize the trade. So the agreement on agriculture is based mainly on three principles. The fact that domestic support should be diminished or erased. So all the programs for price support, food distribution for the poor, distribution of fertilizers or inputs, they are all seen as trade distorting. At the same time, the US and the EU have been able to maintain their domestic support, trade distorting, which we all know that it's a lie, but pretending that by delinking the subsidies from the production, decoupling, as it's said, it would be in a green box of allowed domestic support, which we know is really a lie and well, something which is not honest. The second big, and so these subsidies paid by the EU and by the US, of course, they allow to have prices below the cost of production and to dump products to the southern countries. The second pillar of the agreement on agriculture is market access. It's to open all markets to international trade, to ensure and even to impose quotas of imports. So, for example, Japan doesn't need to import rice. They are producing the rice, but they have a quota of rice that they need to import because they are part of the WTO. So really market access has been one of the key lines of the WTO to push, to oblige countries to open up their markets to imports. And the third line, is on export subsidies, where with the AOA, it was said that they would be reduced, but because of the trick of the EU and the US, we know that these export subsidies actually have been replaced by decoupled payments, which also plays a role of export subsidies. So these policies have led to a huge crisis in rural areas all over the places. It's becoming very difficult to make a living out of producing food. And so this is creating a lot of protest all over the world. It's global, and it's everywhere in the world. But the most prominent of these protests have been, of course, the Indian farmers' protest in 2020, 2021, which were very much so against three laws that the Indian government wanted to pass to liberalize the agricultural sector, in particular, this policy, which is very important in order to regulate the prices in the food sector. Because if you have public stock, you can buy when the prices are decreasing in order to get the prices up, and you can sell when the prices are increasing too much. So it's a very powerful tool, public stocks, to regulate the agricultural prices. And the Indian farmers, through more than 1 year of protests, they've really managed to have the Narendra Modi government pull out these laws, and so these laws have not been able to pass. And then last winter in Europe, we also had a massive and historical farmers protest, which were very much linked to this deregulation and international liberal trade. Basically, the start of the protest were in Germany when the government announced that they would cut subsidies on gasoline for agriculture. And it would have meant an increase of the cost of production for the farmers. And what we have seen over the last years have been a sharp increase in the cost of production, while the prices paid to the farmers were remaining stable or even decreasing in some cases. So this situation was not possible anymore for the farmers. So when the German government announced this cut in the subsidies, many farmers, including in our networks, thought that is not possible. We can't make it to have such increasing cost of production and the prices, which are just not following this trend, because there is no market regulation policies to ensure that the prices are linked to the cost of production. So in front of this, we've seen really the contradiction, in particular in Europe, of the fact that the ongoing policy for almost 40 years has been the demand to the farmers to be competitive, so to produce cheap food. And on the other side, we have had for a few years the ambition of the Green Deal to agriculture towards more sustainable agriculture. And as ECVC, as the European coordination Vía Campesina, we have always supported the Green Deal. We have always said that we are in support of the farm to fork strategy, which is the agricultural chapter of the Green Deal, saying, yes, we need to reduce the use of chemical fertilizers, we need to reduce the use of pesticides. But we have also said since 2020 that it will not be possible without market regulation. It will not be possible to keep the demand to produce as cheap as possible in order to be competitive and to do this transition towards agroecology. So there is a huge contradiction. And in front of this contradiction, what happens? Copa-Cogeca, the big farmers and the big cooperatives, the agribusiness sector, they say, okay, if there is a contradiction, then we get rid of the Green Deal, we get rid of the farm to fork strategy in order to continue to produce and to be competitive. And what we say is that in front of this contradiction, we should keep the Green Deal. We should keep the farm to fork strategy, because we do need to make a transition towards agroecology in Europe for health, for the climate, in front of the biodiversity crisis, and also because this transition will make the rural area more lively. It will maintain jobs in the rural area. So for many reasons, we do support the farm to fork strategy. But we say, so we need to get rid of the neoliberal dogma to the demand of competitiveness. We need to go back to some protection of the agricultural markets, but also to market regulation to ensure that the prices paid to farmers cover the cost of production and also cover a decent revenue and social protection for all the farmers, but also for all agricultural workers in Europe. So yeah, that is to say, for several decades, you have left us to the mercy of markets. If market economy were so efficient, then why are we in debt? Why are we getting fair price for produce? Why are corporations making profits while we suffer? So in front of this, we decided last year in Vía Campesina that we would keep our position to say WTO out of agriculture, to be against all free trade agreements, but that at the same time as we were opposing free trade agreements and the WTO, we needed to propose an alternative. Because I think we got aware that we would not get the end of the WTO without having an alternative. Because many countries need to trade. And this is fine. We are not against trade. We are against free trade. And that is very different. We do believe that it's possible to organize an international trade respectful of food sovereignty. And this is the reason why we started to discuss among the peasants' organization of La Vía Campesina to see how should trade be organized at the international level so that it does not go against food sovereignty, so that it's respectful for the small-scale food producers, so that it's respectful of human rights, in particular of peasants and indigenous people rights. So what should be the rules, the new rules of a fair trade that would work for the people? One of the reasons also why we think it's the right time is that the WTO is facing a huge crisis. In particular, Donald Trump decided to not give the mandate to a judge in the dispute settlement mechanism of the WTO. And this dispute settlement mechanism, it is what makes WTO powerful, because it's giving a weapon to the WTO to punish the countries if they do not obey to the WTO rules. So from the moment that they do not give the mandate to have a US judge there, this dispute settlement mechanism does not work anymore. So WTO is without weapon anymore. So we can say that now WTO is a kind of zombie organization. It's still there, but it has no more power. And actually some countries, in particular Indonesia and India, have been starting already to issue new regulation, not necessarily in agriculture, but in the industrial sector, which are completely out of the WTO. So we say, actually, we could just make as if WTO agreement, and in particular the agreement on agriculture, does not exist anymore, because it is a reality. They don't have any way anymore to impose the WTO role. So I will present, I see that the time is passing very quickly, so I will present our proposal very quickly. And maybe also I should say that for us, we are very much inspired by the process leading to the UN Declaration on the Rights of Peasants and other people working in rural area. Because the process of the UNDROP has been that we, and in particular the peasants organization from Indonesia, they wanted to have a new tool adopted by the UN on peasants' rights. And so in the years 2000, we started in La Vía Campesina to draft what would be the UNDROP, and then we pushed it in the UN Human Rights Council. So we know that it's possible, actually, that from the peasants organization, from the peasants movement, we make a proposal and then we push the government to adopt it. So that is our inspiration. So for this, we drafted some articles, but just like for the UNDROP, when we started, we had some articles, but it was not complete. And then we had to negotiate that. So these are the articles that we have been working all last year. But we know that in the contact with allied organizations, discussing this with governments, discussing this with UN bodies, it will change. So that is fine, but we think it's necessary to make a first proposal. So the first chapter of our proposal is the right to food sovereignty for all people and all countries. So it is the idea that the priority should be food sovereignty and not international trade. So countries have the right to protect their market. They have the right to have minimum support prices. They have the right to have a public stock. They have the right to have subsidies. They have the right, all this, they have the right. The only thing that they should not be allowed to do is to attack other countries with dumping products. So that should be forbidden, but all other types of policies, also defining the standards that are appropriate for the people, we think that countries and the people should be able to define their own standards and not to obey to kind of international standards. And we believe that UN bodies, in particular FAO, should support the countries in implementing these food and agricultural policies based on food sovereignty. So that is the first part. The second chapter is on how we organize international trade. Once we have said that, we say, okay, first food sovereignty. Then there will be trade, and we want trade to continue. How should it be organized? So that is the big second chapter. So first, international trade should respect the highest standards of human rights, peasants' rights, indigenous people's rights, but also all ILO standards for the rights linked to labor rights and the rights of the workers. Then we think that no country should be excluded from international trade. Like what is happening right now with the blockade of Cuba is not acceptable, because we say that trade is important. So why should country be excluded from international trade by unilateral decisions made by the US? So all countries should be able to participate to international trade. We also say that regional trade should be promoted before long distance trade. So countries should be able to get organized, just like the European Union, just like the Western African countries, to organize regional trade and give priority to this before long distance trade. We also would like to promote country-to-country agricultural contracts, which were very common before the WTO agreement. So, for example, we know that we know that, for example, France has a capacity to export grain, and that is structural, the capacity of the country to export grain. And we know that some countries it can be difficult to be self-sufficient in grain. So that's fine. But we think that this trade should not be under speculation and in the hand of transnational companies. That we could decide that there is a contract to say, okay, that for 5 years we will sell that much thousand tons to that price, and that is fair for the producers and for the consumers on both sides. We also think that agricultural inputs should be regulated, the trade for agricultural inputs. So fertilizers, pesticides, seeds, it should not be led to the free trade. It is the role of UN bodies to promote this international cooperation on solidarity. And also that public external debt should never be used to limit the food sovereignty of a country, because we know that very often it has been used by IMF and World Bank to really attack the food sovereignty. So this is something that we want to prohibit. The third big chapter is on prices, wage, and currency. And here we think that each country participating in international trade should set up a public observatory on production costs and selling prices for agricultural products and inputs, so that there is a kind of transparency. And so that, and this is the only way also to forbid dumping. If we need to know what are the production costs and what are the prices in every country. We should prohibit dumping and export subsidies. Also, we should prohibit the speculation in the price of agricultural and food products, and in particular, the speculation linked to financial sector, which is very strong right now. And also that the currencies used to trade agriculture and food products must not become tools of geopolitical domination, which is now the role with the dollar. So we think that in particular, UN bodies should promote a diversification of the currencies used for international trade. And of course, that the rights of agricultural workers should never be used to be competitive. So the fact to make dumping through bad working conditions and low wages should not be the way to be competitive in the international market. So yeah, the fourth chapter is on conflicts, natural and human-made disasters and food aid. Also because we know that very often it is at the moment of natural disasters, wars, they are being used, these dramatic events, for big transnational companies and to enter markets, and also for imperialist strategies to impose rules on countries. For example, very clearly, it's a strategy to use these very dramatic moments to impose GMOs in many countries. And we think that this cannot be the case. So yeah, we think that food should never be used as a weapon of war in international conflicts. And also that in the event of natural or other disasters, international food aid must not be used to the detriment of food sovereignty of the country which is affected. So this means that we might need food aid imports at one moment, but as soon as possible, the local production should be given priority so that small-scale farmers in the country which is affected by a disaster can rebuild the food sovereignty of the country. The fifth chapter is the defense of the commons. So it's more the investment part of the trade. So the fact that land, water, seeds, territories are not commodities, and that we want to protect them out of this international investment. Also the fact that we want freedom of movement in international waters. This is also very much linked to imperialism, so that we believe that if every country has the right to trade, then international waters must be free for the movement of ships from all countries. And the last article is on the fact that international digital trade should be subject to exactly the same rule as the other trade. So that is a presentation of what we thought would be important as articles. Here are some of the basic principles that are in our proposal, so that different countries to determine their own agricultural and food policies, the respect for human rights, the fact that land, water, seeds, and territories are not commodities, no country may be excluded against its will from international trade, the principle to have public observatory on production cost and selling prices, the promotion of regional trade and country-to-country contracts, and the fact that the currencies used in in trading agriculture and food products should not be used as and now is the moment when we are looking for allies to promote this tool. So that is the reason why we are doing this presentation, because from Vía Campesina, we know that we need to build a big coalition of trade unions, of environmental organizations, of a peace movement, of social justice movement, and many other organizations, indigenous peoples movement, in order to promote this tool. And we also know that we need to start discussing this proposal with governments, with the progressist governments. Europe, we will need some governments to take this proposal up, to build this up, and we also know that we need to start discussing it within the UN. We are thinking in particular of the UNCTAD, because this is the goal of the UN Conference for Trade and Development that was created by the non-aligned countries to exactly this, to build a trade system that would be in favor of fair development for the southern countries in particular. So yeah, I am done with my presentation. I hope it was not too long and it was clear enough. And now we can have a conversation about this. Thank you very much.